Transformers is a franchise all about change and adaptation, and sometimes change means taking the idea or design of a classic character and reinventing it in such a way that it gains a life all of its own and a fan base all its own. I will admit I'm a bit traditionalist. I feel like if you're going to create something radically new, then might as well make a completely new character rather than completely shift an old one. However, there are plenty of reimaginings that give lie to that create new looks and takes on a character that are fantastic to watch or read about, and some that stand out above the others. So today we're doing the top 10 reimagined Transformers. And to be specific with this list, let's keep this in mind. We're not talking about characters who share a name. We're not talking about like a trademark dump on a new character. Armada Blur and G1 Blur are completely different characters from each other. So we're not going to equate things like that. It's going to be the same name and the same take on the character, but done in a different and unique way. So let's start this list of top 10 Transformer reinventions, and we're going to start number 10 with something that is rather painful for me to admit to. I don't want to give Dreamwave any credit for anything whatsoever. Unfortunately, I do have to kind of admit that they did wonders for the Micromasters and the Action Masters. A lot of reasons why these characters have characterization in any official fiction at all is because Dreamwave put a focus on these characters as untapped potential. And it's true, they really were. When they did the Micromaster miniseries, it was the only time we really got to see Micromasters have personalities, characters, and stories. They weren't just tiny little figures trying to compete with micro machines anymore. They were actual Transformer characters. And since then, we've seen Micromasters kind of step up, and those characters have become full-fledged and even full-size Transformers in fiction since then. And a lot could be said the same about Action Masters, though I think those would have come along on their own eventually. We've seen plenty of them homaged and even getting completely new toys over the years lately. But it was Dreamwave that first put them in a spotlight and actually gave some kind of backstory and personality to them. Even TF Wiki admits most of the Micromasters and Action Master pages wouldn't have any biography details or description if they hadn't done it in Dreamwave. So I hate to give Pat Lee credit for anything, but in this sense, yeah, this actually was something that was necessary. At number 9, we're going to go into a controversial one because I want to get my credibility out of the way right away. And just to make sure you're in for the ride, I want to make sure we put this in here. We're going to look again at Autobot Megatron from IDW. Now, put the pitchforks down. I know this is blasphemous for a lot of people, but hear me out. We're going to go over this one more time. The IDW take on Megatron was a villainous character. However, when you give him a backstory to explain why he became what he was, a justifiable reason for the actions he took, and then to have this slow corruption, this escalation in violence until the violence is all he could see, now you've given the villain depth. Now you've given a method for his madness and, honestly, a justifiable reason to enact, a war across an entire planet. You have this character shift when he realizes how far he's gone and how far he's come from what he originally intended. That tells a completely different story that is unlike anything we've ever been able to tell with Megatron before. Yes, I know we always want him to be the bad guy, the villain, but I'm sorry. The 80s depiction of Megatron was just generic after-school cartoon villain. There is a little bit of depth to him, but really, he's just the bad guy for the Autobots to defeat every single week in order to sell toys. That's it. I love that IDW tried to give the character a place to begin so they could build new stories and new ideas behind him. So I know it's not a happy thing for a lot of people, but honestly, if you just take out the part where you want Megatron to always be the villain and just look at the story they crafted, I think it was worth trying at least once. Don't worry, we're probably never going to see it again. At number 8, we're going to go to Transformers Prime, which had plenty of characters reimagined, but not too far out there, with a few exceptions. Now, I'm going to be frank. I could have put Armada Star... No! No! At number 8, we're going to shoot over to Transformers Prime, a series that had a ton of reinvented characters, but also a ton that just kind of shared names with past characters as well. I can't really say a Viacon is reimagined from Beast Machines when it's just generic grunt enemies that all turn into cars. The only thing they share is the fact that they're drones. So we had to look at some of the more prominent characters. I could have easily put a ton of them on this list, but we're going to stick to a few that I think were the biggest departures and biggest changes. And one of those is Breakdown. We go from this combiner limb character who got next to no characterization or screen time in the original cartoon and comic book, aside from being Menassor's leg, to being this fully fleshed out character in the show, the big bruiser of the Decepticons, going one-on-one with Bulkhead episode by episode, taking heavy damage like the eye patch here and still coming back. And this fun connection that he had with Knockout that comic books have expanded on since then. It's telling when this reimagining isn't really like trying to get shunted back into the Stunticons in any way. Usually when he pops up, it's right next to Knockout, which I think tells a much better story than just, hey, I'm part of this team of 5, I'm going to blend into the background now, and if anyone is going to talk and with any meaning, it's going to be Motormaster. In this case, yeah. And they did a ton of things with the character in Prime. Maybe would have liked to see him last a little bit longer, but for just sheer shift and just how big of a change they could make, yeah, Breakdown had a massive shift. And yes, he still feels enough like the original character in personality and colorization. I'm going to count it. I know it's a loose one, but I think it works. At number 7, let's go to Cyberverse. Now, this one, I didn't really expect to add this one to the list, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there is a lot of character changes to it that was a lot of fun. And I think the one that stood out the most to me in the whole series was RC. G1 RC exists to be the girl in the cast, and I don't really like that. I like, depth and personality to my characters. RC was just kind of this gentle Autobot who was good with a gun every now and then, but she pretty much just served to be the token female of the cast. I love reinventing RC. Prime did it, in such a way that it felt like a completely different character. But when you take the Cyberverse version of RC, you've got the similar tropes and similar styles of RC, but you've given her this added fun depth of being this adventurous spirit where she has this myriad of stories that she can ramble off. All these different places she's been, sights she's seen, rescue attempts she's made, all with massive weaponry being involved. She really likes her massive weaponry. And she's got all the selfies to prove that she did all these things. It's fun when you can see an RC and a Grimlock reminiscing over stories and adventures they had together, and then comparing stories that they had. That's a very different take on an RC, and I think it makes her a lot of fun. I like this adventurous, universe hopping adventurous RC. Like a Lara Croft of Transformers, if you will. So, yeah, I had a lot of fun with her. Really wish she had gotten more screen time, but what time she got, I think had a pretty big impact on what could be a direction for the character if a writer was willing to pick up on it. At number 6, we have to talk about My Boy. And when we talk about My Boy, that means Blitzwing. And this time we're going to look at him in Transformers Animated, where the triple changing aspect was turned into this character quirk of having 3 faces, 3 personalities, and 3 distinct vocal tics to go with them. It's an interesting take. Like, the second you hear this faux Austrian accent, it's already interesting. And then, like, when he flips to the anger face and it's just straight up Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay, now I see what you're doing here. Now I see where the accent comes from. It was a fun character because he had different ways of being an intimidating sight, whether it was the calculating calm face or the the rage and the like forceful hostility of the anger face, broken up by the chaotic face, which made him a lot of fun anytime that's the one that his head flipped to. Oh, Blitzwing was a lot of fun in this. So, obviously, I have many of my own personal takes on Blitzwing, but I don't think this was a bad one. Remember, in G1, he's, aside from like an accidental bit of character growth they did, he was largely just, like this, power-hungry kind of meathead Decepticon. So to kind of find this way of twisting him around and actually incorporating that triple change aspect into his personality gives him a really interesting layer. And the fact that that face-swapping gimmick was retained for his next toy in Thrilling 30 really does tell you just what an impact that depiction had on the character. We have not seen it since. I'm not sure, though, I would be opposed to seeing it again. Handled properly, that is. Next up, we're going to talk IDW once again, and this time we're going to be talking not one but 2 characters who basically came from the same place and got the same level of attention and growth, and that is going to be Swerve and Tailgate. Both mini-bots whose only meaningful appearance in the G1 cartoon was to give Trypticon more bodies to kick around, or in Swerve's case, stomp into the ground. They basically existed just to give him more kill count. There's nothing to these characters if you look at the main fiction. You get to look at the back of the box, and that's pretty much it. IDW took that and created a completely different aspect to both of these. The insecure Tailgate, who was just dependent on Cyclonus for confidence, and the fast-talking and ultimately, secretly insecure Swerve, who really just wanted to be friends with everybody and really wanted to be, part of the group. It's 2 different characters who have their own kind of psychological quirks that make them something of this insecure outsider just kind of looking for that connection. But both end up being really fun in interesting ways, both in Tailgate's relationship with Cyclonus and its depiction throughout the IDW comics, and also Swerve, because Swerve was just fun. Swerve was just a lot of fun to have around, especially just the wisecracking, people getting annoyed with him. He's fun. I think both of these toys, both these characters, going from remolded mini bots for Wave 3 for Year 3 that got nothing after that, all the way to into the modern generation's toy line where both had IDW based toys released, I think says a lot about just how well the reimagining of these 2 went over. This is one of those cases where I don't think you can go back. I think this is a Mr. Freeze situation where the fiction they got changed them so well, it really does need to be permanent, taking them away from being just generic nobody Autobots and retaining something that makes them genuinely special. That's where I feel these 2 belong, and I would love to see both incarnations of these 2 mini-bots again someday. Next up, we're going to get into one that I did not expect to talk about again, We have to go to Armada for this. Now, the Unicron trilogy did a lot for new characters. It did very little to bring back old characters, and that's really for the best, that they wanted a clean start. But there were just a few legacy characters that had to come back, and one of them, of course, was Starscream. Armada Starscream is an interesting twist on the character because it's such a small change. Traditionally, Starscream wants to defeat Megatron and overthrow him for leadership of the Decepticons. He is power hungry. He wants the authority and the status that comes with being, the leader of the Decepticon army. The trick is, in Armada, you remove that desire for power and just give him this deep-seated hatred for Megatron, the person he is, how he commands his troops, how he treats the minicons. That is what you build off of for Starscream, and it seems like a simplification, but when you take that power hunger out of his personality, you come up with a Starscream who has to take different approaches. He can befriend the minicons trusted to him. He can side with the Autobots when necessary. He can self-sacrifice when he has to. This is a Starscream with a lot of depth, and it comes from making such a small change, and I think it is a masterstroke when you can make a tiny change to a character and radically redefine them into something that is genuinely special and different from their original depiction. Armada Starscream has that in droves, and it makes me all that much happier that he's getting a modern figure with modern standards, and we can actually get this fresh new take on Starscream on our toy shelves once again. And this time his hips are going to work, so I'm excited. But yeah, again, this is one I don't really expect to ever see again, but man, he leaves an impact. Number 3. This one is pretty much expected to be on this list if you know anything. This one, we have to go to Beast Wars, and we have to go straight to the top. No arguing it. We have to give the nod to Megatron. This is still, in my opinion, the best of all Megatrons. This is incredibly cold and calculating. He's intelligent. He is capable of master stroke plans. He is capable of manipulating not only the Maximals, but the Predacons in his command as well. He knows exactly how to get someone to do exactly what he wants for his schemes to succeed. He is genius, an absolute genius of a villain, and makes him one of the most threatening Megatrons of all time, even when he doesn't have an army behind him, even when he's not in control of the planet Cybertron. He is a threat to literally all of space and time, simply because he can plan and calculate and manipulate. Makes him an incredibly fascinating character and an incredibly effective Megatron, incredibly effective villain. With, frankly, let's be honest, far more wins under his belt than the original Megatron did. That's saying a lot, considering he didn't have as many episodes to do it in as the original Megatron did. So yeah, it's easy to forget that originally this Megatron was going to be original G1 Megatron. The two are so distinct now, you would never confuse the two. You would never say they were the same guy, never say that one followed the other. But as separate entities, this is a very, very solid Megatron and a great reimagining of the villainous tyrant. Number 2, we're going back to IDW here, and this time I think it is one that I want to say is universally accepted as a really good reimagining, but maybe that's just me and my personal bias talking, because I love the character. We're talking about Thundercracker. This technically isn't even a reimagining. The original bio for Thundercracker states that he doesn't really like what Megatron and the Decepticons are doing to the planet Earth. He thinks it's beneath them, and he doesn't really like how, what they're doing to the humans on the planet. The cartoon scrapped all that and made him just a generic grunt on the team. Comic books pretty much did the same thing. We didn't get the original intended depiction of Thundercracker until IDW, when he was given the chance to learn about Earth culture, adapt to it, and actually find out he enjoys it. And to discover that when they consider themselves so much higher as a society and a race compared to Transformers, and he looks at the history of humanity and how often we adapt and change. To think that they live for millions of years and they're pretty much doing the same thing they've always done. And he genuinely wonders who the real Transformers are here. It's such a cool way of like painting the character. And then to just find out that he's creative. He wants a pet dog. His best friend is a human. Like, he comes so far in what he is, going from just one of the Seekers to someone vastly different who can still connect with past Decepticons, but really, if was ever given the chance, or if he was ever truly comfortable with it, would absolutely be an Autobot. This was a fantastic depiction of Thundercracker, and a reimagining that I can always get behind if they want to do it again, even though it's technically how he was always supposed to be. At number 1, we're going back to Transformers Prime again. I sat and thought about this, and like, Megatron, Armada Starscream, Thundercracker, like, I could put any of them at the top. They're all fantastic reimaginings of those classic characters. However, Prime did one character so differently but so well that it deserves to stand out amongst everything. We are talking about Soundwave. Talk about taking one element away from a character and adding so much and changing so much. You took away Soundwave's voice. Now, who does that? Who does that? Soundwave is one of those super distinct voices from the original cartoon that everyone remembers. That's iconic of the original Transformers. It's iconic of the character. Why'd you take away his voice and his face while we're at it? To see Soundwave interact with other Decepticons is terrifying. To see like this cold, blank face staring down and seeing the reflection of the Decepticon he is talking to hear that Decepticon's voice played back with Soundwave's vocoder on top of it is super creepy. And it helps that this Soundwave is very Slender Man in design. He is tall, long, lanky, very creepy to look at, and the tentacles don't help either. He comes across as the all-seeing eye and ear of Megatron, and in that comes across far more intimidating than any depiction of Soundwave before him, and any version after him, quite frankly. It's a masterstroke of reinvention. He still serves the same purpose in the Decepticon army. Fierce loyalty to Megatron, but also he is the communications officer, and this takes it to its purest form. The one time he speaks in this show has so much impact because they saved it. It all works so well, and I think this is one of those characters that Legacy really needs to tap into, and I think a lot of people want them to tap into. I would love to have a brand new take on Prime's Soundwave. Just the design, the characterization, just like so like perfectly unique amongst Transformers, and yet somewhat familiar as Soundwave too. It hits a perfect little blend and makes for the best reinvention in a Transformer I could imagine. So for this list, Soundwave superior indeed. And that is going to be it. Please tell me in the comments how I screwed up. Please tell me that Starscream should have been higher. Please tell me that your favorite reinvented character didn't make the list at all. And just feel free to berate me over Autobot Megatron again. You know what? I'm here for all of it. So thank you guys for watching. And next time I have a top 10 to go through, I will see you then. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.